Hi, welcome to the Football Writers Podcast. My name's Mike Calvin. I'm joined by Dominic Fifield of The Guardian and Tom Hopkinson of the Sunday Mirror. He was once called the man who couldn't retire, but 5 years ago today, he did, and he continued to remind us of his greatness. All our best to Sir Alex Ferguson in his latest, greatest battle. Football management, they say, is the hardest game. So, if we're picking our manager of the season, what should we be looking for, Dom?
Well, the impact that he's had on his team, primarily, I guess. And maybe that's punching above their weight. I mean, you could look at Burnley and Sean Dyche for that. Or the success that Pep Guardiola has enjoyed at Manchester City and how that has been achieved with a philosophy that he's stuck by when people doubted whether it could be imposed in the Premier League. But it has to be, you know, each club is measured on its own success or failure, and you know, those who have enjoyed, whether it be mid-table security or winning trophies, those guys have been steered there with good managers.
Let's try and look at the context, not just of the club that Dom spoke about, but of the game itself. Tom, is it harder than ever to be successful as a manager?
I think that'd probably be a little bit unfair to managers of years gone by. You know, I think that there was probably a more level playing field back in, you know, whether it's in the 70s or 80s. Certainly the difference in the amount of money that some managers have got to play with these days compared to, you know, what those who have gone before them have been able to spend. Then yeah, but it's. There's no doubting that it's a very competitive time in the Premier League at the moment. I'm not saying it's the best Premier League we've ever seen, because I think you only have to look at the number of teams involved in the relegation battle this year to know that there are quite a few. You know, at least 10 teams who, until recent weeks, could easily have been drawn into the relegation battle. But yeah, you know, just to sort of expand on what Dom said, I think it's about the entertainment you provide as well to your supporters, and part of that entertainment, it could be a really rough, disappointing 1-0 victory, but a victory that keeps you up and brings out the emotion and the excitement from that. Or it could be some of the football that we've been use the word treated to, I think, from Pep Guardiola, from Jurgen Klopp. And I think even it's important to say, right back at the start of the season, when Manchester United started very well from Jose Mourinho, before things obviously changed and United seemed to get a little bit more conservative, or a lot more conservative again. So I think it's all those factors, and as Dom says, you literally you almost do have to weigh it up club by club. But I think there'll be two outstanding candidates for it this year.
Yeah, if you look at it, the modern manager has to be all things to all men and women. You know, in terms of, got to be a politician, got to be a bit of a performer, obviously got to have an intrinsic understanding of the game, got to be able to get the best out of people in terms of man management, so he's got to be emotionally intelligent. That's a heck of a package to put together.
Absolutely, and we underestimate it. We see the manager picking the team, conducting the training, on the sidelines during the game. But take an example, Arsene Wenger last week, when they played at Atletico Madrid in the Europa League, he apparently did 8 flash television interviews post-match, immediately after the game's finished, and he's got to compose himself at each of those, and then walk into a media theatre and talk to the written press as well. Those are the sort of duties that come with the job, and they must be oppressive. They must grind you down over time. It was interesting to see, and those are just media duties as well. It was interesting to see Roy Hodgson last week suggest that keeping a team up in the Premier League these days is almost a 2-manager job. He looked at it and said, well, you may need 2 managers over the course of a season to do that at certain clubs. I mean, his aspiration is, the club that he's at the moment, is to make sure that doesn't happen. They don't need to be in that situation, and they're more of a mid-table team. But for 7-8 teams in the Premier League, we're seeing that 2-manager thing, and sometimes it works. Sometimes, like in Stoke's case, it just didn't.
And when you look at that, those decisions, you know, you've also got to back that up with really good recruitment. You know, so you know, we'll talk about Stoke later on, where you've got Jack Butland saying, well, basically our recruitment's been a farce. Well, that can't just be down to the manager, can it? It has to be a much broader sense of responsibility.
Yeah, but I think English football has railed against this for a long time. You know, if you think of the great managers we've seen over the years, you know, whether you're going back to the Paisleys and the Shankleys, or whether it's the modern day Wengers and Fergusons, they have run their clubs top to bottom and have been completely over everything. Nothing has gone on, whether it's, as Dom says, you know, whether we're talking about media commitments from the players, whether we're talking about buying and selling players to the small matter of picking the team and making sure you get results at the weekend, and even down to the academies. You know, managers have gone with that, but I think the game has evolved now to such an extent that where we see with Arsenal, you know, Ivan Gazidis, yes, he's put himself on the front line now. He's there to take all the responsibility, but he's had to put that team in place to deal with contract negotiations, to deal with player recruitment, because it's just the way the modern game has gone and the way it's evolved.
And it's interesting, you've got, I found it very poignant at the weekend where Wenger talked in his final press conference at home of saying, I've now got to go away and reconnect with myself. Takes a lot, doesn't it? Takes a lot out of them.
It must do. I mean, it dominates their life. Ferguson was in his office every morning at 6 a.m. I bet he was the last person out of the training ground as well most days. Wenger is not going to be any different. I mean, he's a man. We said for years, you know, this is a man who goes home and watches videos of. Back in the days, we had videos of scouting players or games around Europe, around the world. He was completely obsessed, and that's not going to stop overnight just because he's left Arsenal. And he'll end up pining for a job. You know, you just can't see him detached from football. It's just not going to happen.
I know Eddie Howe is the same, you know, so it's not just the older generation of managers, you know, even this new breed of whether they're managers, whether they're coaches. First one at the training ground every morning, as you'd expect from the manager. You know, he's there to set the tone and give players, you know.
I had one of my earliest ever interviews with him. I got there at 20 to 7 in the morning and he beat me in.
By a couple of hours. Yeah, but, you know, this is what it does. It does take over your life. And you know, a lot of people have jobs where, you know, they don't get to spend much time with their families. And when they are around their families, they're thinking about work. You know, it's not just football that has that. But it is a level that I think a lot of people could never quite get their head around, because, you know, I mean, I remember speaking to Antonio Conte, Dom, at a press conference late last season, and he was going off on his holidays. He was off to Sardinia, wasn't he, for a couple of weeks with his family. But the idea that Antonio Conte gets on holiday with his family and stops thinking about player recruitment or what argument he's going to have next.
Most of that holiday texting Marina Granovskaya saying we need this.
We need more money. But it is, you know, and look, they're very well remunerated for it. So I think that's where a lot of people don't have as much sympathy for them as
I think that's wrong. You know, you've got to look at the human being behind the job and behind the paycheck, haven't you?
I wouldn't say it's totally wrong, because you know, they don't have to be football managers. They you know, if that affects them, if the amount of work and the amount of stick they get is something that they aren't happy to handle, then go and do something else. You know, there are plenty of other jobs in the world. So I think you know it goes hand in hand. If you're Arsene Wenger and you're getting £8 million a year and you don't want to walk away from it, then, you know, I think look, yes, we do have to probably understand there is a human being behind it, behind the mask of the football manager. But I still think, you know, everyone goes into that job knowing the pressures and knowing that they're going to get
types as well.
Yeah, knowing that they could easily get sacked. But if they do get sacked, it's not the end of the world, because they're walking away with a handsome payoff.
Quite obsessive, Dom.
Yeah, I mean, I want to almost some of the language I want to use isn't quite so kind. But I mean, yeah, they let it dominate their lives because they're not normal in that respect, are they? They're not. They don't want to switch off. They're obsessing over every minute detail of the jobs, and it's a particular type of person that can thrive doing that. I don't think I'm one of them.
Oh, I don't know. If someone waved the paycheck in front of you, I think
I really
you'd give it a
go. Look, some of them will be motivated by the financial gains that they can have. But I mean, look, for example, Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard could have. He's earned enough money over his life. He doesn't need to go and work at Glasgow Rangers and take on a job that everybody from the outside thinks this is a big task. Yeah, mad possibly, but he goes there thinking that he can achieve something, and he goes there driven by this and will be obsessive. He will be there all over that club, and trying to change things for the better. And I don't think that's being motivated by finance.
Yeah, look, if I'm suggesting that they're totally motivated by finance, I didn't mean it that way. It's just part of the cover that you get for putting yourself on that front line, for being the person that has to shoulder the burden of managing a football club.
Let's talk about some specifics now. You already mentioned Roy Hodgson as is he a potential manager of the year? I would say probably yes, given what he's done. I put my hand up. I was asked after one of these shows, will Palace go down? And I said, yep.
You turned to me at 2-2 against Everton.
I did.
In the autumn and said, they've gone.
Yeah.
They've gone. And in fairness, at that point, it looked as if they probably had.
But with Roy, we've all seen him immediately after games, and he is a different animal to the one that you would meet the other 5-6 days a week in terms of almost, that eyeballs out, almost wanting confrontation with people. He's been some really spiky press conferences immediately after games, and you look at him and you think, what is this doing to you?
Yeah, you're right. He can be spiky, and he is emotionally spent when he comes in and sees us post-match. But I can sort of understand that sort of the down from the adrenaline that he's just been going through his body. For him to be doing that at 71, and Palace haven't offered him a new contract as yet, but I'm sure those talks can't be far off. He's only got a year left, and to think that Roy Hodgson could become the oldest manager that's ever been in the Premier League at 73, when we thought that he was a spent force after England, I think that's fairly remarkable. He's surrounded by good people there. He's put together a good coaching staff, and I think we underestimate that sometimes. Going back to Gerrard, it's key, who he brings with him and has working around him. But Roy has that at Palace with Ray Lewington, his sort of erstwhile number 2, but Stephen Reid, Dean Kiley there as well, and it works. So what he has achieved this season is remarkable. Not because they had no points after 7 games and no goals after 7 games, but because he didn't have a goal-scoring centre forward at any point in the season. He had an injury crisis, the like of which he admits he's never seen before, which took out 12 first-team players at one point. And yet he's still, and also they didn't buy anyone of any note in January. They didn't he's working with the players that he inherited. And a squad that everybody acknowledged was imbalanced when he got it, and for them to be potentially targeting a 10th place finish at the final weekend of the season is ridiculous.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think Roy would be a candidate for manager of the season for me. I think he's done a very good job, and as Dom says, the injury list has been just incredible when you scan through it. But I think when he has his entire team to pick from, his whole squad to pick from, they have got some very, very good footballers. I think Yohan Cabaye still very underrated. Loftus-Cheek, I know, again, someone else who has missed a large chunk of the season, has come back just at the right time and has been playing very, very well. And in Wilf, they just have this player who is a joy to watch, a throwback to wingers from days gone by. You think of the wingers that we grew up watching, those who sort of hogged the touchline, and he's
chalk on the boots players.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's a little bit, he's obviously got the modern day edge to him. But I think when you've got players at your disposal like that, players who can score goals, then you're in a very good position. Again, look, Don will probably say, well, he missed a big chunk of the season through injury as well. But when Roy has got his whole squad to choose from, which he's clearly had now at enough times in the season, then he's got a good tune out of them. But it just raises that question, and I know he hates this, but this whole, is he a very, very good manager at a certain level? But when he goes up to, stepped up to a club like Liverpool, when he stepped up to the national job, did it work so well for him? And the evidence for me points to the fact that he is better with using players who, are a bit more malleable than maybe some of the better quality of players.
I don't know if you can judge Roy Hodgson on Liverpool just because of the chaos that club was in, with Hicks and Gillette. I think it was Hicks and Gillette at the time. So he was hiding to nothing, and Kenny Dalglish was sort of on the scene as well, wasn't he? And the fans were always going to go back for Kenny. And England, look, let's judge it after the summer. But you know, he did get us to one quarter-final of a major tournament at the Euros in 2012. Brazil and France were obviously very, very poor. But then who has been a success in the England job over the years?
I just think if you look at, and obviously we've not followed his you know, when he was off gallivanting all around Scandinavia, managing teams and learning the trade and doing very, very well, and you know, wouldn't it be great?
And also influencing other coaches.
And that's what I mean. So I'm really not trying to take anything away from him, but I just think when you think of where he's got the best out of the absolute best out of players and taken them to a level that perhaps they didn't know they could get to. I'm thinking at Fulham, West Brom, and now at Crystal Palace. I think that's where he's excelled. Look, he's still, as Dom says, given the circumstances, still probably did a reasonable job
of winning the Swedish title, isn't it?
That was the one he mentioned, wasn't it? After
team,
we asked him after he looked like he'd kept Palace up with the 5-0 victory over Leicester, and he was asked that question. And you know, is this your greatest achievement? And he talked, you know, it was a typical Roy Hodgson answer, wasn't it? Really, you know, it'd be easy to say that this was, but perhaps if I go back 30 years, 40 years to winning the Swedish division for the first time.
I think behind the scenes, privately, he's pretty chuffed with what he's achieved at Palace this year. I think it will mean a lot to him. I know he plays it down, the whole Croydon boy thing, and I can sort of see why. But his dad was although his dad was from Newcastle, his dad was a Palace season ticket holder, and I think he will look at it and think, I would have made my dad proud with what I've done. Yeah. And he has. He's been a breath of fresh air.
And the other team in this secret derby, Brighton. Chris,
that's secret.
Someone said to me
just
the
one
other
that
day,
no one understands. That's all.
But someone said to me the other day, "What a good young manager is." I said, "He's 57."
I know, yeah.
But that, notwithstanding that, keeping Brighton up is a great achievement as well, isn't it?
Yeah. This was something we asked him on Friday after the Manchester United game as well, and he said, look, obviously it ranks amongst the greatest achievements in my career. I think the thing, I've probably said this to you before, Mike, the thing with Chris Hughton is however he leaves a club, it's always in a better state than when he found it, whether marginally or in Brighton's case, you know, leaps and bounds forward. He's just a very, very good manager, and he handles everything, all the aspects of the job that Dom talked about at the start. He's very calm. Now, if you don't think that Chris Hughton hasn't got it in him to hand out a telling off when he needs to, then you'd be mistaken, because you won't last that long in a professional dressing room or a professional football manager's hot seat without it. But he just has a very calm, authoritative manner about him most of the time, and I think again for a club like Brighton, he was just the perfect fit at the perfect time for them. And I also think the club was perfect for him at that time in his career, because he had the backing of an owner who and some very good people just under the owner who know football clubs, know how to work them, and they've all come together at the right time, and it's been a joy to watch how well they've done.
It's been an evolution at Brighton, hasn't it, for a while now, and sort of steady progress. Had that one blip that when Sami Hyypiä was in charge, and then Chris came in and sort of steadied the ship, and from that moment on, they've progressed again. But everything about the setup is geared towards being a Premier League club for the long term, and the team that he's assembled. It's actually a really tall team, powerful team. We've got, obviously, everybody looks at Duncan, Duffy, but they set the tone. And there's real presence in midfield as well. Stevens and Proper are in there, and Glenn Murray is one of the most underrated. He's an underrated player. I don't think people actually underrate Hughton as a manager, because everybody knows he's blooming good. But Glenn Murray, when you watch him play, he is so clever, and he must give centre-halves a complete nightmare. Paul, United last Friday, Chris Smalling didn't know how to deal with Glenn Murray, and that is shocking for an England international. But he plays out of his skin, and he's perfect for them. And they've evolved. They've been realistic with the signings they've made, and he is realistic about what happens next as well. He was already speaking about how, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think people were asking whether they could do a Burnley next season. Well, no, hold on a second. Let's just make sure we're just taking it steadily up to the next step, and I'm sure they will.
He's made the team the sum of its parts, hasn't he? You know, they haven't got any players who you would say are particularly outstanding, but they just work very, very hard. They know what jobs they need to do, and they played Manchester United off the park. I was sitting in the two press boxes at Brighton, and I was sitting in the higher one on Friday night, which is like the overspill, and you got a bird's eye view of the game, and to watch the patterns and the shape of both teams. Now I'm not someone who, I know a lot of journalists are really into that side of the game, but it wasn't, it's not something that ever bothers me. But it was really fascinating to watch the shape that the Brighton team kept throughout that performance, and United just simply couldn't deal with it.
Survival, of course, is the name of the game, and it's not assured as yet for Huddersfield. But already there's a lot of talk about David Wagner and what comes next for him. Leicester have been mentioned in dispatches. What strikes me about his role there is that he's unified not just the club, but the entire community. And if you've got that together, a bit like Brighton to a degree, that means an awful lot, doesn't it?
Of course it does, yeah, absolutely. And I don't know whether he's actively done that. I just think the club were going in the right direction anyway. I think the ownership were quite shrewd, and they were, looking to galvanise the locals. And the fact that Wagner has come in and had this unexpected success last season to take them up. I mean, no one saw that coming. No. That is what sort of inspired and whipped up the area behind the football club. It would be a magnificent achievement if he kept them up as well, because that's an entirely new team, pretty much, from last season. Their transfer dealings last summer, they were really efficiently done. It was all done very early in the window, so people sort of had time to bed in. But they made so many signings. I mean, it wasn't like a team that goes up and sticks to its, the tried and trusted. They went in and they made sure they got 2 people in every position, and sometimes that meant 2 new people in every position. And for a team to stay up, potentially having scored only 27 goals all season, it's not great to watch, but it's pretty admirable, isn't it?
I think the team, the city, the fans, the supporters can relate to him, and I think that is half the battle. I think Dom's absolutely right. I don't think he's gone out and necessarily tried to garner this support and this faith in the community, but I think they clearly got some momentum behind them in getting promotion. It reminds me a little bit of when Ranieri went into Leicester. That it was sort of, people looked at it. I'm not comparing them as people or as managers, but all of a sudden things started happening, and the manager started saying things that the community could get behind, and this affection develops. And it's not just good for towns and cities; it is very good for the football.
But you mentioned almost like a sense of identification there, Tom, and I don't think you can get a greater example of that at the moment with Rafa Benitez and Newcastle, and he's now playing a political game.
Really, Rafa?
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? Basically, back me or I'm off to Mike Ashley. How do you see that playing out?
He's played it with Mike Ashley a few times now, and Mike Ashley hasn't really backed him, and he's still there. So I don't really know how it's going to play out. I think he's obviously in a far stronger position this summer than he has been when he's played the game before, and I would love Mike Ashley. I'd love to see him put. I sounded a little Kevin Keegan at Newcastle then, didn't I? I'd love to see Mike Ashley give Rafa the back in, because we've talked about how Liverpool and Newcastle as cities and clubs, there is sort of a commonality there in the way that the community is, or everything's centred around the football club, and I think it would be really fascinating to see him backed. To see whether he could make Newcastle. I'm not saying he's going to make them a top 6 side straight away, but whether he could just, get them back into the Europa League and maybe, slowly get them back to being one of those great clubs in the Premier League. Whether it'll happen, I don't know, because after what he's done this year and some of the players he's brought in, some of the signings he's made, Kennedy looks like he was a very good signing in the end, wasn't he? And I think there'll be a lot of good-sized clubs on the continent looking at him as well and thinking, well, if he really is as sick and tired of dealing with Mike Ashley as he said he is, then we can offer him an out.
Will bigger clubs ever look at Sean Dyche? Because they should. Yeah,
clearly they should. There were a lot of clubs that were looking at him last summer, but for whatever reason decided not to pursue their interests, and a few will have regretted that in the period since. For Sean Dyche, lost his best centre-half last summer in Michael Keane. He lost his first choice goalkeeper in September to a dislocated shoulder that's kept him out for the entire season, pretty much. He lost Andre Gray, one of his sort of talismanic forwards, and they finished 7th. And that says it all. He's an absolute genius at what he's done. It's almost he suffered almost because Burnley have been so good all season. People have almost forgotten about him now. They've been up there. Tom was saying before, they went through that long period without winning in the middle of the season, but didn't lose their place in that top 7.
11
games without a win.
It's amazing, but it says a lot about the division.
Still, yeah.
But maybe we're just sort of almost over the course of a season, which feels like a long season, but we're sort of used to seeing Burnley there now. But it is remarkable that they're there. They are punching so far above their weight, and that is because of the manager and the spirit that he's got and the quality that he's unearthed and tapped into.
Clever recruitment as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
fantastic.
Someone like Jack Cork, who's made a very good career for himself after leaving Chelsea, but just a superb signing for a club of Burnley's size.
Plays every minute.
Absolutely. Jeff Hendrick from Derby. I think when Hendrick left Derby, a lot of Derby fans, Will Hughes was always the one that they thought of that team would go on and make the step up. Jeff Hendrick, when he's played in the Premier League, has been absolutely excellent this season. Some very clever footballers. I would have loved to have seen Sean Dyche go abroad actually at the end of this season and maybe try his hand in Spain or Italy or even Germany, somewhere like that. A good league, just to get a little bit of experience. But now he's got European football, then I think you stay at Burnley, even if one of the bigger clubs does come knocking, which I don't know whether they will, but even if they do, then stay at Burnley, have one more year, just get that extra little bit of European experience. That is the one thing that really is missing from his CV. Look, I mean, obviously the big trophies aren't there as well, but if he can have a year there, and then I would say go and spread your wings, go off onto the continent and go and show people over there what a good manager you are, and then maybe one or two of the owners of the bigger clubs here might just start waking up to it.
He even lost, correct me if I'm wrong, but he even lost Robbie Brady to an injury as well, and Stephen Defoe, and yet he still managed to do it. There you go, it's a shoo-in for me. We'll come to that later.
Yeah. You mentioned Europe there. Will we only be able to make our final judgment on Jurgen Klopp on the evening of May 26th?
No, I think we've made it. I mean, I certainly have. I was in the camp that wasn't totally sure. There was a lot of very exciting football going forward, but wasn't addressing the flaws at the back, which was always going to prove costly. But then he went out and spent £75 million on a new defender who has come in and done a very, very good job. He lost a player who a lot of people thought was irreplaceable in Philippe Coutinho and sold him for a phenomenal amount of money, which I know they said that the money for Van Dijk was already assigned before the sale of Coutinho. So he's got the money to spend from that, or at least a big chunk of the money to spend from that in the summer. And I think you have to say, on the second half of the season, he has looked a very, very high class and quality manager. I think the football that he's got Liverpool playing going forward has just been a joy to watch. There's no other way to describe it. I think he's brought Andy Robertson in, didn't throw him in. A lot of people who saw him, I think there was a game early on, I think it was a 1-1 draw, and Robertson played, and then he was back out of the side for a little bit, and he's sort of wondering whether Klopp had thought to himself that maybe he'd made a mistake, but he just blooding him slowly into this Liverpool side, and all of a sudden he's got one of the most exciting attacking fullbacks in the country, and that front 3 and 4 have just been brilliant.
And let's face it, he also makes our life a lot easier. He's brilliant in the press conference, isn't he?
Is he?
Oh, I think he's fantastic. Yeah.
I like him. I like his mannerisms. I love the way he does the whole staring at the opposition thing prior to kick-off as well, from the centre circle. But I wouldn't say he's the most quotable manager out there. Maybe
I just think there's a real sense of...
There's a charisma about him, which is amazing.
There's an aura about him.
Yeah. I think he plays that very well, though. I mean, I think as soon as the TV camera comes on, that big, beaming Colgate smile appears, or any other toothpaste. But it can disappear very quickly when the cameras are off as well. Again, we talk about managers. You have to have that side to you. It's not just all happy clappy backslapping and everyone's isn't everyone doing a great job and we're all enjoying it. It's such great fun and we're playing this rock and roll football. There have to be times when the manager absolutely digs his players out, and Klopp isn't afraid.
It's interesting
Sunday,
when he dug out Salah for diving. That was interesting.
It wasn't a massive criticism. It was just like a little subclause amongst the sentence about diving in general. But he did say it, and
not too many managers do they?
They don't, do they? You're right, and it did. Everybody's ears pricked up when he said it, and he was right as well. It was a dive, and it feels out of character for. But it was indicative of a man who was having a very frustrating afternoon against a team that had clogged up their penalty area, and that is where Liverpool are still a work in progress almost. How were they going to bypass Chelsea? How were they going to get through that? And they didn't manage it Sunday. They won't have that problem in the European Cup final because Real Madrid won't set themselves up that way. But next season, when Liverpool have to mount a title challenge with Manchester City, they have to be adaptable and have the options to get through clogged up defence.
I think the nature of the way they've got to the Champions League final has been very impressive. I know some managers, Antonio Conte was saying last week that the difficulty in winning the Premier League compared to the difficulty in, or any division, compared to winning the Champions League, that you can't compare them because it's eight games or whatever it is compared to 38 games. Tom's absolutely right. He does need to just maybe make another couple of signings, which obviously they've got Naby Keita coming in the summer as well. So he does need to make just a couple more signings that gives them the ability to go head to head with Manchester City over the course of 38 games, rather than just a flash in the pan, or not a flash in the pan, but when Champions League games come around.
Let's then use City's title as a bit of a bookmark for Pep Guardiola's career in England. Have we seen the best of him yet, or is it still the best to come?
It's hard to imagine how Manchester City are going to be better domestically in the future in terms of the Premier League. You'd like to think that this is in the same way that Leicester was a wake-up call to the elite clubs. You'd like to think that those chasing Manchester City now realise that the bar's been set really high, and they've got to reach those levels, which would make next season harder for City in the Premier League. But I don't think we've seen the best of necessarily of his team, because I think they will target Europe that will be the big frustration for them this season, the fact that Liverpool got past them in that Champions League tie. That's what he wants to. That's a trophy he wants to be lifting, and that's the natural progression on from the Premier League, because he's done that now. So there is scope for them to get even better, but I just like to think there'd be more competition at the top end of the Premier League next season.
Yeah. How long do you see him staying here, Tom?
It's a very good question. I don't think we're going to see a dynasty. I really don't. But everything that he's saying at the moment just sounds like him, not just him, but his family and his the backroom family, if you like, as well. They're all very, very settled in Manchester. I think the city has welcomed them with open arms. Certainly the blue half of it, anyway. Again, we talk about managers. We talked about Chris Hughton being the perfect fit at the perfect time, and the club being the same for him. And I think the same can probably be said of Guardiola and City. I think we are seeing the best of him, rather than we have seen the best of him, because I agree with Dom. I think they will get better. I mean, having Mendy back for next season will make them a better side. There'll be no arguments about that. And I think what's very important is to have heard the likes of Vincent Kompany and Sergio Aguero talking about not just winning a title, but going and doing it again. That's when over the weekend when the news broke about Sir Alex Ferguson's illness, and we were getting phone calls from our sports editors saying, look, we need to put pieces together to just to reflect what's happened today and talk about his career, and you go through that list of achievements, and I was even just checking the number of Premier League trophies he won, or sort of the dates of the Premier League, and the number of times he won it back to back or 3 times. You just, that is the toughest part of being a manager. It's an incredibly difficult thing to keep remotivating players to go again, and I think that is what we're going to need to see from Guardiola. Can he remotivate? We know he's done it with Barcelona. Can he remotivate this group of Manchester City players to say, let's not rest on our laurels? And absolutely, Dom's right. that Europe. I think that's where we'll see him. I think he wants to establish them. I don't think he'll leave before he's established them as regular semi-finalists in the Champions League.
Conversely to that, Dom, who do you think have been the most disappointing managers for you? Who've done jobs which could have been improved?
Frank de Boer would probably be the obvious one.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Well, of managers who are still in the job.
Yeah.
Well, I think Conte's had a pretty miserable season, to be honest, domestically anyway. Well, in the Premier League, they're having this late spurt of games of wins that's given them a bit of hope that they can get back into the top four. But I think it's false hope, to be honest. And having seen them at Watford and against Bournemouth in sort of January, February time, and even sort of wasting points home to West Ham a month ago, they're not a team that's really warranted top four and Champions League qualification this season. And a lot of that I think is down to Conte and the general mood of defeatism that he's sort of promoted at the club, and it's just been a constant whinge since the summer when he didn't get his way. I don't believe that Chelsea recruited Antonio Conte and told him we're going to be spending money like we were in 2004, 2005. I just don't think that was possible.
The brief's not been that for a long time.
Okay, he had a wonderful first season, and some might argue that he deserves then to be rewarded by a £300 million splurge, which is clearly what he wanted to do. But that's not how Chelsea operate now. So if you know the brief, if you know the restrictions you're working under, get on with the job that you were recruited to do. And I just think he's been too political this season. It seems churlish to say that a side that's going to finish arguably fifth, possibly fourth, has had a poor season, but I think Chelsea raised the bar their own way last season, and they've fallen well short.
I think he should have whinged less, and the club should have backed him more. I think it's somewhere in between.
Sums it up pretty well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Who do you expect not to be around at the end of the summer?
Claude Puel, I think, is the obvious one. Conte, I really don't. I think once the payoff has been, once they've sort of negotiated that, I think that's just the sticking point. I think he's just been ambling through, frankly, till the end of the season, and I think the club probably looked at it and thought that's the best option for us, rather than spending a lot of money in the summer to get rid of him and then spending another lot of money to bring somebody else in. But I think Conte will be the one of the obviously Arsene Wenger aside, but the one of the big managers who moves on, and I think both parties will be happy for that. I think we sort of I actually was quite complimentary about the way that was all handled last summer, when let's not bother extending the terms of your deal, but we will just give you a better contract for the fact you've won the Premier League. It just seemed very grown up, and in a club that's not always known for doing things that way. It just seemed a very clever compromise for them. But I think Puel has been the one. I was surprised when Leicester signed him, and
I couldn't see him motivating a team.
I'm sure. I'm told behind the scenes he's very charming and a nice fella, but when we speak to him in press conferences, I fail to understand how he motivates, as you say, the team, but galvanises the team when they need it, and gets a team to go and express itself. He whispers when he talks to us. There's not, whether it might just be that he doesn't particularly like the media or dealing with the media. It could be for a whole range of reasons. But I struggle to see where the personality comes from that he has to inject on a dressing room that's full of big characters like Jamie Vardy, like Kasper Schmeichel, someone that they are willing to get behind, which clearly, Ranieri was able to get the best out of them. Obviously, that all changed and the relationship went south after the title win. Nigel Pearson, think of the character of Nigel Pearson and the way, again, whether you like dealing with him, whether you like what he has to say or whether you don't, you can understand how a group of young men would buy into what he's got to say. But unfortunately, with Claude Puel, I just don't get that.
This will be his second successive season finishing in the top half of the Premier League and losing his job in the summer. And we'll see what happens with Leicester season.
But I think
isn't that modern football though, isn't it? Because basically, if we're being honest, what's happened here is the players have turned around and said, "We're not having you, pal." But it happened at Southampton. It's obviously happened again, and in that context, to turn it on its head, West Brom. Now, the overwhelming likelihood they're still going to go down, and the fact there's even the merest doubt is amazing. Should West Brom go for continuity in the form of Darren Moore?
Well, it's hard to argue they shouldn't. What more could Darren Moore have possibly done other than maybe not concede a last-minute equaliser to Swansea in his first game in charge? He's had an incredible effect on a squad that I thought was quite good, and I misread it completely. But clearly a squad that was very much underachieving under the previous two managers this season. When you talk about continuity, though, I do wonder whether the issue there might be how many of those players are going to be at West Brom next season if they do go down. In which case, do you need continuity in terms of a manager? I mean, does it even help to have him in there? But he's been brilliant, and you just wonder what might have happened had they made the second decision on the manager this season slightly earlier, or indeed given Darren Moore the job after Tony Pulis left.
Yeah, I think you're right. It doesn't say a lot about the West Brom squad, does it? That they didn't start playing better under Alan Pardew, and who I thought was a really good fit for them. I thought he would probably steer them towards that more progressive style of football that they wanted, without completely moving away from the stage they were at. But I know Pardew went in early on, and some of the ways he tried to get the squad on side. I think he asked Oliver Burke what his name was in one of the first weeks of training, and and the rest of the lads sort of looked around and thought, well, you either don't know who our record signing is, or it's a bit of a daft question. And it was a steady trickle of things like that happening, and it was such a shame because I really like dealing with Alan Pardew. I think. I know he has this image, and he's portrayed as this person who just completely loves himself, but he's not like that. There is a little bit of that in him, but he's very engaging company, never ducks a question when we ask it to him, always very respectful, and again, he's someone that unlike Puel, I can see young men buying into everything he's got to say. On Darren Moore, the one point I would make on that, I agree with what Dom said about there are going to be wholesale changes, and so new players coming in, does he have their trust like he's got this group's trust? Yeah. But it is a very different kettle of fish, managing a team and being the manager full time, than just coming in for 5 games at the end of the season and or however many it's been. Despite the fact he's done an incredible job and some of the scalps he's got. But what I would like to see for Darren Moore now is that he maybe is offered a job, League One, lower end of the Championship, something like that, and someone gives him a chance to show what he can do, and then who knows in 3 or 4 years' time whether he gets a chance a bit higher up again.
Absolutely loved his reaction to that winning goal at the weekend. Just unmovable. It was absolutely brilliant. Good, wasn't it? Absolutely brilliant.
Now, we're obviously in a bit of a delicate situation here, with, late morning on a Tuesday when the relegation playoff between Swansea and Southampton is just about to hit us. As a broad perspective, are you surprised that both of those clubs are in grief?
No, I'm not. I think I would have been this time last year. I was told Southampton were going to be in the bottom 4 in a year's time. But I think when you analyse the decisions that they've made, both in terms of their own recruitment, their managerial appointment of Pellegrino, and the stubbornness, which was praised at the time over Virgil van Dijk, but actually ended up being, we're basically going to retain poison for 6 weeks in our system, and then we're going to get rid of him and not have enough time to spend the money to buy replacements. For once, a club that's lauded for getting everything right in terms of its long-term planning has got the short-term planning absolutely horrifically wrong. And that's why they find themselves in that situation. They have given themselves a chance, obviously, a big chance. And with Swansea, no. Swansea have been... I thought Paul Clement got dealt a very bad hand there. The ownership issues, the recruitment, you're going to talk about that in a minute, but it's not been good enough for a period of time, and they've regularly find themselves down here, and they've been bailed out in recent years. This year it may come back to haunt them.
Talking of recruitment, Neil Warnock, Cardiff City are going into the Premier League with a team basically which was stitched together. Guys from Walsall, Rochdale, players who really were journeymen. Now, you can argue about the style, which is pretty primitive, to be honest. But what about that achievement about getting Cardiff up?
Incredible. 8 promotions. I mean, he's not just done it with Cardiff, he's done it 7 times before. I mean, this is a manager who he's the ultimate Mr. Marmite, isn't he? But I really like him. I know he gets people's backs up, but you just have to take your hat off to the job he's done at Cardiff. I can imagine that Vincent Tan isn't the easiest owner to work for, and I can imagine from Vincent Tan's perspective that Neil Warnock is not the easiest employee to have, but it's one of these unholy matrimonies that has worked very well and borne fruit for Cardiff. I hope he gets a chance in the Premier League. He's not always gone well. Well, it has never gone well for him when he's got promoted. I hope it goes a bit beyond November before we start saying, his job's under threat if they're not doing well. But look, they've got the backing now. I think it's by his own admission that the style of football's not been great at times this season. But they're a Premier League football club. Whatever you say about them, they can get there. All the players are going away as Premier League players this summer. They're coming back next season, and he will have a few quid to spend. He will get to put his stamp on that squad a little bit more, and fair play to him.
You like dealing with him?
Yeah, I loved it. I thought, yeah, absolutely. I know, yeah, he does rub people up the wrong way, but he was always brilliant for us. He was one of those managers you could just ring up and have a chat with, and he just does a brilliant job. He just does a brilliant job wherever he goes. And I don't really know how he does it either. I can't get my head around how he has moulded that group of players into a team capable of.
There is another side to him though. He's not just this bristly character that everyone sees. There is a really charming side to him as well, and he is absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, just a couple of questions from the viewers and the listeners because time's running away with us. Billy Hush, I should really dole out the tin helmets on this one. Should Manchester United sack Mourinho this summer before he self-combust as per usual in season 3, or United completely lose their admirable DNA of fast, exciting football? Told you it was a tin helmet job, didn't I?
No,
you can't. No. The answer is no.
Look, season 2 hasn't gone how it's always gone for him at previous clubs. So why should season 3? I think stick with him. I mean, the man's trophy record is almost incomparable to who else would you want apart from him or Guardiola, really? I mean, are you telling me that if you bring in Allegri or any of the other coaches that they're going to do a better job with Manchester United than
it would be getting rid halfway through a project as well.
I think so. Yeah, I think one more year and let's see if he gets through it.
Okay. Re Guardiola, Davy Joe asked, Manchester City are talking about only making 2 signings in the summer. Which positions should they sign in?
It might be best for everybody else if they didn't make any signings in the summer. I imagine the talk was a defensive midfielder and a forward, wasn't it, or a wide forward, or a forward capable of playing wide or through the middle. But to be honest,
not another central defender.
Central defender for me would be the other one. Yeah, and
then they have bought. I mean, are we writing off John Stones?
No, but I think I think what we're saying is how can we guarantee Company play? I mean, Company starts when he's fit. For me, he's that good, and Otamendi has raised his game. But I still think, if let's say Company picks up a long-term injury early in the season, Stones and Otamendi are first choice central defenders. I know there are other players who can come in, but I still think if they've got 40, 50, 60 million to go out and spend on another top quality player, then bring him in.
So equally, the final question from Aaron Cox: should Arsenal's new manager gamble on young players such as Maitland-Niles, Mavropanos, Nelson, etc.?
Well, I guess it is a bit of a gamble, but Maitland-Niles has shown this season that he's got proper quality. You've got to find the position for him and stick with that. I don't get the impression that Arsenal are going to have an awful lot of money to spend in the summer, so they can't be writing off these kids because they're going to have a role to play within squads. But should they gamble with them? I mean, what we're saying, we sell other people to make sure that they play every week. They won't do that, but I think they'll get game time under the new manager.
No, new goalkeeper or someone to at least provide competition for Czech more regularly than Ospina does, and maybe a new centre half. But I really like the look of Mavropanos as well. So yeah, I'd give him a go, and that front 3 or 4. If they click as they have done at the end of this season, at the start of next season, then it could be very exciting for the new gaffer.
But that's, again, a lesson in patience, isn't it? It's going to be about giving whoever comes in time. Not 22 years.
Not something football.
But
Well, time, we've got no time left, okay? Finally, your managers of the year, or your manager of the year.
Sean Dyche for me.
Sean Dyche as well.
Well, that's 3 of